You're still in the role, sir.
Okay.
Let's proceed with the redirect of this witness. Want to state your name again for the record, sir?
Brian Speck.
He's still under oath.
Could you review what's been marked for identification purposes of Exhibit 101? Okay. It's a two-page document. Could you tell me what that is?
It's a first floor plan and a second floor plan of doesn't specify which building, as well as the exterior of the building, one of the buildings at City Center.
Can you at the same time open up the white book and turn to Exhibit 17? The white book. Do you remember yesterday being asked some questions about Exhibit 17?
Yes.
And Exhibit 17 is prepared by who?
Design Group.
Okay, and what's it dated?
April 22nd, 2005.
And if you could go to Exhibit 101,
Okay.
you go to the second page, which is 684.
Okay.
And who is that prepared by?
Design Group, the same.
Okay, and what is it dated?
The same, April 22nd, 2005.
Who is Falk Design Group?
It's the engineering architecture company, I'm assuming, that was hired by Portland.
Do you recall if you reviewed Fifth Third Exhibit 101?
I don't specifically recall. I'm sure it got into the file and I took a quick look at it.
Okay. And could you go to the second page, which is based in 684? Does it have straight? At this time, move to introduce into evidence Fifth Third Exhibit 101.
No objection.
There's Exhibit 101 to begin.
Your Honor, if I could distribute that amongst the jurors, please?
Yes.
And they could put it in their book when they have an opportunity. If you could go to the second page, which is base stamp 684 in the bottom right-hand corner. Does that show both a first and second floor plan?
Yes.
Okay. If you could take a moment and look at the second floor plan.
Okay.
Could you tell me where the restrooms are located on the second floor plan?
In the middle of the building, next to the elevator, the mechanical rooms.
And how many rental units do they have marked on the second floor?
8.
If you had 8 rental units on the second floor with one set of bathrooms, what's your understanding what that design of the second floor is for?
Office space.
Would you expect if it was designed for residential space that would have a restroom in each unit?
Correct.
Would it have a kitchen in each unit?
Correct.
Would it have a shower or bath in each unit?
Yes.
Now, if you could look to Exhibit 17 in the white book.
Okay.
Does Exhibit 17 on the second floor indicate an area that is residential?
So it shows it on page 690 on one unit.
And that would be on the second floor of Building 6 only, right?
It appears that way.
As the relationship manager handling this matter back in 2005, would that concern you?
Not overly. I mean, it was always the intention that that building was going to be taken out. That it was going to be sold or moved from the... So the main concept of the main buildings, the majority of the buildings were all going to be the first floor retail and second floor office.
So if building number 6, well, could you explain to us what a takeout is?
A takeout is an agreement that, or basically a way that the bank knows that we're going to be taken out on that property or on that individual building. So a takeout in banker's term is either that we get a sales contract that the building's going to be sold, or we have an agreement in place that comes in a letter from another bank to show that they're going to refinance that out of the loan, and so we would move that loan to another institution, which was common in 2005.
So as part of the takeout, Fifth Third would have agreed to finance the construction?
Sure, as long as we had the takeout, we knew we were going to get paid down.
Since Fifth Third Exhibit 101 and City Center Exhibit 17, does this confirm that only place residential shows up would be on the takeout building, which is the restaurant banquet facility?
Correct.
And this was City Center's architect that prepared both Exhibit 101 of Fifth Third and Exhibit 17 of City Center, right?
Yes.
Now if you could go to Exhibit 18, I believe it is. If I could approach Your Honor to help with this. Yes.
So this different.
We've never had an 18 admitted.
Is there 18?
I'm not sure. We don't have any.
We've never had an
The
18.
city probably, but
We never it off. We
Never
never
been admitted.
rejected to it when we were in office.
In your book?
your vote.
I don't have it.
Do you have the letter?
We don't have it here. Back there.
is not admitted.
30. Thanks.
We don't admit it.
We don't have
If you could, and not for the jury only for the witness right now, could you go to the City Center Exhibit 33, which is the white book, excuse me.
There isn't one.
I don't have a 3310.
I gave it to you because I haven't admitted.
That's all right. Let me approach the witness, Your Honor, if I may, please. Could you review that document?
It was shown to me yesterday.
Okay. And that's from the City of Crown Point?
Correct.
And on that document, does it discuss what part of City Center is allowed to have residential?
Says buildings 5 through 8 will have living units. Building 5 will have 8 living units. Building 6 will have 4 living units. Building 7 would have 12 living units. Building 8 would have 12 living units. And Building 9 would have 12 living units.
So the approval for living units would have been,
Building 5.
wait, let's,
Okay.
phase 2 is building 7, 8, and 9, correct? 7, 8, and 9?
Correct.
All right. Was Fifth Third financing any of those?
No.
Building 5?
We were not financing that.
Okay. What else is on that list?
Building 6.
Building 6?
That's the only one.
Okay.
That's all of them.
And how many units?
This is 4 living units, 2,700 square feet each.
Okay, Fifth Third was only financing the construction of that,
That was the intention, yes.
and they were going to be taken out.
That was the plan.
So even if the bank, well, do we know when that was received by the bank?
I don't know that I ever received this.
Okay. So even though it's in the bank's file, do you have any recollection of receiving that prior to you leaving in April 2006?
No.
So that's something that would have been produced after you left.
Possibly, yeah.
Okay, if you could go to City Center, Exhibit 3,
Which book?
white. Thanks for reminding me. I'd like you to read to yourself date stamp page 64 when you get there. Do you see the attachment to that email? What is it dated? It says, see it below the email, it says 12/31/05.
Yes. That's CS 12/31/05.
So, in the body of the letter, Mary from City Center says the original one was submitted at least 3 weeks ago, and that email is dated January 12, 2006, correct?
Correct.
So there's, the attachment was generated on December 31, 2005, which is only 12 days before that, correct?
Yes. That appears correct, yes.
Now if you could go to, in the same exhibit, date stamp 80. When are the sworn construction statements for draw 3 executed by City Center?
Looks like January 18th of 2006.
Okay, is that something that's required before Fifth Third could approve the draw?
Yes, you need to sign sworn contractor statements. That's what this is.
If I could approach the witness. I think you'll review that for a moment.
Okay.
Do you recognize the author of that letter?
Cindy Jensen, yes.
What's that? And what is it dated?
January 24th of 2006.
And so it's dated roughly, or it's dated 6 days after the sworn statements are executed, right?
Correct.
And what does Cindy Jensen direct Tycor to do?
In accordance with the bank's draw request for the above construction escrow, that they deposited funds. Since the previous funding, the bank has advanced $7,000 and some change of interest. When you are assured that you will receive all the appropriate waivers and supporting documentation, you will need to fund, we hereby authorize you to disperse.
So on January 24th, 2006, just 6 days after the final sworn approvals for draw 3 were executed by City Center, the bank funded draw 3.
Correct.
And they put the money in Tycor Title's account.
Correct.
All right, now can Tycor Title just turn around and pay it out?
No, they have their due diligence that they have to do, collect the waivers, do their process, update title, bring down title, make sure no liens are being filed, and then they disperse.
And in fact
But the bank doesn't control that. That's strictly on their end.
okay, and where are the lien waivers? Who's getting the lien waivers?
The title company,
Okay, but who are they requesting them from?
from the contractors,
Okay, so the contractor has to get the lien waivers in
to get paid.
to get paid. So this particular draw wasn't funded until February 6th, but the money was in Tycor Title's account on January 24th. Did Fifth Third have any play or any responsibility in getting any of those documents for the title company to fund?
No, that's what you pay the title company to do.
So any delay in that time period wasn't Fifth Third's delay.
Correct.
So yesterday, I think council alluded that it took some 35 to 40 days to get draw 3 funded. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Based upon this additional documentation you've now got in front of you, isn't it clear from the time City Center submitted its sworn draw, which is dated January 18, 2006, that Fifth Third funded it within 6 days?
It appears that's correct, yes.
So there wasn't a big 35, 40-day delay.
No.
If I could go back to exhibit, Fifth Third Exhibit 101, it's the one that you guys might get the the default design group, Exhibit 101, is that drawing and the specs for that, how if the contractor or how City Center determined the cost would be made up to produce this building?
Correct.
Okay. So if City Center wanted to change its use and make these residential units, they would have had to change these drawings, correct?
Yeah, they had to change the drawings and get separate bids.
Did City Center ever go out and get separate drawings and separate bids that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of.
And in fact, that would change the whole cost structure of the project.
Correct.
And that would have to be approved by City Center, or by the bank.
Theoretically, yes.
If you could go to joint exhibit, they tricked you guys. They grabbed the red book and threw the black.
I think they should have provided you guys some desks.
Let's go to exhibit 1 in the black book. And we talked about this. We talked about this exhibit yesterday. Go to page 4. This page basically talks about where the sources of the funds are going to come from and how they're going to be used. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct.
All right, let's go under sources. First, it says cash equity $360,000. See that?
Yes.
Okay. Where did that have to come from?
From the owner.
And then next is $840,000. Where did that have to come from?
From the owner.
And was the $840,000 an amount that was required to be paid in a certain way over time?
$210,000 at the start of each building.
And Mr. Plank, you reviewed this document with him, right?
Correct.
And he knew he had to come up with $360,358.
Correct.
The jury, hopefully this is big enough where you could read it. I'm going to refer you to Exhibit 2, Mr. Speck, page 4. You see on the screen here the sources in use. Is that set out in your blue memorandum?
Yes.
And those are the same numbers that you would have told Mr. Plank?
Yes.
Did you in your blue memorandum explain how the $360,000 had to come into this project?
It appears total equity through the site work will total $360, 15% of total cost. The balance of $183 will be injected at the time of closing on this request. And he's paid out $77,000 in engineering and architecture, and he injected $100,000 at the time of the land purchase.
Okay, so you were giving him credit for the equity he had in the land, correct?
Correct.
And you were giving him
Credit for the $77,000 in engineering and architecture. Most likely paid to Mr. Falk. And then he would have to bring in $183 at the time of closing.
Okay, if we could go this side here. I believe is in the Black Book at 26. And you guys don't have to turn, hopefully you can just see it. Could you read to yourself, Mr. Speck, lines 109, 110, and 111?
Line 109 says draw number 1 is City Center
Read it to
County.
yourself first, and then I'll ask you.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay.
Look at line 110.
Yes.
Can you tell us what the first number is?
$781,840.
Where did that number come from?
That's the amount requested in draw number 1.
Okay, who would have requested that?
Mr. Plant.
Okay. And you did not dispute that request?
No.
Now it says, what's line 111 say?
Well, part of it on 110 says less equity required of $170,434.
And why is there less equity of $170,000?
That was the equity required to put in a closing principal in the loan for the agreement.
And that brought you up to $360,000.
Correct.
All right. So he's still been required to put $210,000 in.
At the time we start funding the vertical and the first building.
So ultimately, you took out, or he could have brought the $170,000 to closing, right?
Sure.
All right. It was done that way by an agreement of you and Mr. Plank?
Yeah.
Why was it done that way?
It was, we could short the draw or we could bring in cash. Shorting the draw was allowing him to use part of his equity in his masonry business, so he wasn't actually having to bring in all cash, so he could use some of the work that he did through his masonry company and use that as his equity.
Now if you could go to 44N. In the red book. 44N. Now, the closing out on the first draw was on October 24, 2005. Did you send an email out on October 22nd, which was a Saturday, 2005, explaining how you came up with these numbers to the borrower?
Yeah, I sent the email to Rich explaining what our bank fees are, what the estimated payoff is, the draw amount, less his equity required.
Did he ever call you up and say, I'd rather bring in $175,000 in cash equity?
Not that I recall.
This was something that you had discussed with Mr. Plank, and you guys agreed this would be the best way to do it.
Yeah, that is my recollection, yes.
Go to Exhibit 45. Are you familiar with this email you prepared?
Yeah, what we talked about yesterday.
All right. It's dated December
It makes me never want to send another email again in my life.
It's dated December 23rd, 2005. What was the purpose of that email?
To balance out the next draw and to get the equity for the second building and to bring the loan in balance.
So there's a draw request of $759,517.72.
Correct.
All right. And then there were some, it says less closing charges. What was that?
Closing costs that we funded through the initial draw.
Okay, which weren't required to be funded, right?
Correct.
So Mr. Plank could have either brought in at $36,273 to you.
Or we get short the draw.
Okay. And you talked to him about this?
I'm assuming I did.
Okay. And
We funded the first draw, so there was never any discussion or change to do it. So, yeah, I'm assuming that the discussion was had, and that's why we agreed to do it.
now, is that closing cost charges, is that up and above the amount that's set forth in the uses section of the budget?
Yeah, that's an estimate from the budget, and if the budget's not high enough and the closing costs are greater than that, then you have to bring in additional cash.
Okay. So, let me ask you the next line. It says less increases in sworn, $62,502. What was that done for?
They made increases in the sworn statement, so their budget was $62,502.67 short or low, and they had increases in their budget, so they have to bring in that extra to balance out the draw.
Let me ask you this. That's cash that they could have brought in order to stay on their budget.
Correct.
Okay. Or the parties could agree that we'll just reduce these amounts off the draw.
Correct.
Let me ask you this. Assuming that the project was a $100 project and the developer had to bring in $20,000 or $20 of cash. Okay. If he goes over budget $5,
He has to bring in $25.
he has to bring in the 5 and the 2 still.
Correct.
All right. Now, that additional $5 over budget, that doesn't go to his equity contribution, does it?
It doesn't go towards the bank's required equity contribution. It comes out of cash out of his pocket, but that's not part of the equity contribution that we're requiring. His budget is his budget. If he goes over his budget, he has to make up the difference out of cash out of his pocket. That's his expense, not anyone else's.
So, those numbers can't be included as part of his equity contribution pursuant to the sources in the commitment letter.
Correct.
Now let's go to less equity required. Tell us what that is.
That's the $210,000 because the first building had been started.
And there are discussions with Mr. Plank about the $210,000.
It's part of the commitment letter, part of the loan documents. He knew that the time the buildings went vertical, he had to put in money.
And during the first closing, he didn't put in the $210,000.
Correct.
So the bank was saying, I'm going to only fund $450,000. If you want to bring $210,000 in cash and pay it to the title company, you're welcome to do that.
Correct. Or they'll short the amount coming back to him.
So Mr. Plank had the option to either just take the lesser amount or pay the $210,000 of cash in.
Correct.
Right? And if he would have gone to that next draw and paid $210,000 to the title company, he would have met his equity contribution for building number 1.
Correct.
Or the first building being built.
Correct.
Building 2. While you're at the bank, did he make any further equity contributions of $210,000?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Just so we're clear, yesterday you were talking, Council, Mr. Beach was talking about equity. There's 2 different types of equity in this case, correct?
Yeah, there's the equity that the bank's required and the additional funds that he has to put in if he's over budget or, out of. So, yeah, I guess we don't consider the 36 and the 62 as equity that the bank is requiring. That's additional cash or equity that he has to put in because his budget was incorrect. And that's typical. I've financed hundreds of construction projects, none is right on budget. They're never to the T. They may be under budget, not very often. Typically they're over budget.
Deb, you don't have to. You can get off your knees.
So if you can underneath, give her a chair.
Yeah, no, I'm done. You shut that up.
Okay. I thought you were sitting down.
My feet are asleep, but that's
Okay, if you could go to Joint Exhibit 2, page 7.
Exhibit which?
2.
Okay.
What were you doing as part of your blue memo on the top of page 7? I'm sorry. I'll let you get there, Mr. Spratt.
Projecting the cash flow of the building, of each building.
And the other top there says operating analysis of pro forma. You see that?
Yes.
What's a pro forma?
An estimate. Educated guess is it's an assumption based upon different things that we know or have been told.
And then in that box there it talks about the type of leases that you assume would be used on this project, right?
Correct.
And based upon that, were you trying to was the purpose of the exercise of the pro forma is to figure out what percentage of leases of each type you needed in order to make sure there was sufficient operating income to pay the bank?
Yeah,
Objection leading.
It's
It's an objection leading, Your Honor. I've given a wide berth here, but
I'll rephrase it. What was the purpose when you prepared the pro forma as it relates to operating income?
It's an analysis to basically to see the viability of the project, if the project's going to work, if it based upon the assumptions that we have. Is there sufficient cash flow at the end of the day to repay the bank? Because ultimately that's what we want to know, is there sufficient income to repay the bank?
And at this time, this is just a
The best guess.
best guess. Also, you made an assumption in the bottom of that pro forma. Item 2, what was that assumption?
Assumes the final loan amount after sale of building 2 of $5,521,000 or per building of $1,840,000 at 7.5% with a 20-year amortization. That's how we determine the annual debt service. This pro forma is kind of like a contractor's budget. It's never exact.
It's a guesses, and if it doesn't, well, let me ask you this, as part of your pro forma, if there wasn't a certain percentage of each lease type, it wouldn't have met the operating income to allow the bank to get repaid.
It's possible.
And that was part of the exercise to see what the percentages should be in the loan agreement.
Correct.
Blue Cross.
Yes, sir. I think you got some new documentation. Let's start, Mr. Speck, I only have this copy here. You got from Mr. Woodward pages 684 and 685.
Correct.
That's only part of tab 17, isn't it?
Correct.
And do you have the full tab 17? It's in the white book, the City Center book. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back and forth.
As long as you give me that exact time, I'm okay. I'm going to go back. Tab 17?
Yes. That has some of the additional pages from this exhibit, doesn't it?
Correct.
And there's at least one building that you see there that's Hawkson.
Correct. We talked about it yesterday.
And you saw there's residential.
Correct.
And it doesn't have toilets or kitchens in there because you have to have the tenant do the build-out, right? How do they want it? Do they want the bathroom here? Do they want the sink there? Those sorts of things.
Correct. Can be designed later.
And that's the concept of vanilla box.
Agreed, yeah, but you don't typically vanilla box a condo, but in this case they did.
And in this instance, you were okay,
It's kind of a preliminary drawing, it could be a final drawing later.
you're okay with building 6 with the residential and the restaurant for that building?
Well, the fact that it was always a plan that it was going to be refinanced or taken out.
And in fact, all the buildings are going to be refinanced and taken out, right? This is a 2-year construction loan.
Correct. But we looked at it on a going basis that if on a lease basis, were they able to be paid back?
Even with a lease, you'd expect it to be refinanced for a long-term loan.
Correct.
Now, Mr. Woodward gave you this letter dated January 24th.
Correct.
You recall that? And I don't think that's been marked, but let's go ahead and mark that as an exhibit.
Exhibit 30.
How do you want that?
That's fine.
Okay.
Oh, we had it contemplated for our book with a tab, but I don't know where the tab is going to go. Which one is it?
We don't have.
This one?
102.
Do you want to make it, I can't move to the 102, that's his, the joint exhibit.
The joint exhibit, I think 33.
May I, Your Honor?
Because our exhibit started at 33.
Oh,
So we can't have two 33s. The next exhibit in line would be 102.
Is that okay with 102? I've never seen it, and you've
All right.
something.
102. So it'd be
That would be
this third,
Third.
exhibit 102.
Thank you.
And we move to admit what's been marked as exhibit 102.
No objection.
And, Jay, could you turn to tab 3B?
Am I turning to it as well?
Yes, sir. Please. And then the second page is page 73. Looks like that.
I'm sorry, Counsel, what did you say, what page?
3B,
3B, thank you.
What page?
page 73. You see page 73 there?
Yes.
And that's the sworn construction statement that was originally submitted by City Center, isn't it?
It appears, yes, that it was sent to Cindy.
Signed by Mr. Plang, notarized by Mr. Keto.
Correct.
And what's the date of that?
December 21st.
And what's the date that Ms. Jensen released funds to High Court?
And that is January 24th.
So it was a little over a month later.
Well, yeah, I mean, this was the original draw. It looks like there were some changes. Again, that was, at that point, it was in Cindy's hands, and Cindy, it appears, have them split up the drawing or submit it on a separate form. So,
And I think Mr.
that was, fortunately, or unfortunately, I wasn't handling that draw. That was Cindy and a different division in a different location. So, it appears that they did submit the initial draw December 21st, made revisions, and then upon the revisions, the bank issued the funds in about 6 days.
And if you look at the first item under under tab 3, that's dated January 18th.
Correct. So the January 18th and the January 24th dates met.
And you remember Mr. Woodward asked you earlier about there's only 6 days between the 18th and the 24th,
Correct.
but actually the draw was submitted on December 21st.
The original draw, and then there were, the construction escrow department asked for changes to be made, and then it was resubmitted on January 18th and funded on January 24th.
So City Center did submit their draw request on December 21st. Fifth Third asked for changes. City Center made the changes and ultimately resubmitted with the bank's approval what the bank wanted on the 18th, and it was paid on the 24th.
Correct.
Now let's talk about the equity contribution again. Could you take a look at tab 10 in the joint books?
Okay.
And this is a letter to you dated October 26th.
Correct.
And it references an October 22nd site visit. I'm sorry, I'm on page 2, which shows the actual letter. And you were actually out there that Saturday, October 22nd, with the inspector, right?
I believe I was, yes.
And there was $971,764 of construction work that had been done by October 22nd. Correct?
Yes, that appears that's the case.
And if you turn a couple pages further, you can see what was included in that. There's site work, 3 to 4 buildings have footings in place. There's fine grading, there's rough grading. That's hard construction costs.
Some of it is, yes. It appears.
Now let's compare, and all of that added up to, on page 2, $971,764, right?
Correct.
So let's compare that to tab 26. The money advanced at closing was $611,000. Do you see that?
Yes.
So the construction cost of $971,000 less $611,000 is Mr. Plank's equity.
I don't have a sworn, so you're not getting the full picture here. I'm not getting the full picture because we had a draw request. The email had said it was a draw request of $781, so I don't have a sworn statement to tie that, so we're not getting the full picture here.
Let's do it this way. It's $611,406, right? Is that the amount on line 109?
Correct. Do we have the sworn that ties to this 971, 764?
If you could turn to tab your construction budget, you recall that?
I need the statement that ties to this
I'll get you
971.
there. I'll get you there.
Okay.
Hang on with me. On tab 2,
What's it?
on page 4,
I think I've got that chart memorized by now.
okay, how much cash equity are you closing?
360, 350. That was the cash equity required for the site development board.
Right, that's the initial.
Correct.
We add that up. Comes to 971, 764.
There you go.
Now, could you go back to tab 10? Yes.
Okay.
Page 2. The construction at the site that was approved, 971, 764.
Okay.
You see that?
Yeah.
So the bank took $360,358 in equity out of just this construction work that has been done that's reflected in the site inspection on October 22nd.
Well, again, I don't have the draw to tie this, so
Assuming that your inspector is correct, there's $971,764 of work. It ties exactly, doesn't it?
it does tie exactly, but I don't understand why because the one closing statement shows a draw of $711,000. So I don't have you need to have the other numbers, the other documents to tie these numbers together.
And I've given you all the documents I've got. We don't get to see all of those. This is what we got.
Okay.
Now let's go back to tab 26.
I can't believe it's not one of these books.
I wish it was. I wish it was. I wish it was. Tab 26. Mr. Plinkett also purchased the land, hadn't he?
Yes.
He purchased the land for about $500,000.
Correct.
And you paid off that note for $394,000.
Correct. Got about $106,000 in it.
So that's another $107,000 of equity in addition to the $360,000.
Correct.
And again, you deducted it from the statement. That was fine with you.
Correct.
Is that a practice that most bankers that are familiar with commercial real estate will follow? Is it deducted?
If it's a builder developer and they use part of that as an equity, yeah, it's common. I've done it with other developers.
In other words, there's nothing taboo or wrong about doing it this way, is there?
No.
Is that something that Fifth Third would do routinely when they're financing commercial developments and the developer is the builder?
Yeah, I don't know that it's routine, but it's not uncommon. I mean, Cindy's the supervisor of that department, and she allowed it to happen, so.
And then in the second draw, you made the deductions we talked about. There was $210,000.
For the vertical construction.
And there was some additional deductions, I think it added up to $308,000.
Yeah, because he was over budget, and then the closing cost of $37,000.
Okay. So I should have added 107 to this number, right, for the land? And you also mentioned there was $77,000 in architectural fees.
That he was required to pay, that he had given him credit for.
And then I think you explained on draw 2 how you got to the $308,000.
Correct.
That's tab 2,
It's detailed in my email that I sent you. And I'll
35.
never send another email.
And then page 34, actually, there's an exact total, $308,000. So this number, 360, plus 107, plus 77, plus 308, that's Mr. Plank's equity in this project as of December of 2005.
That's his equity. That's not necessarily all what the bank considers equity, because he was over budget on the fees and and he was off on the contractor's budget. But it's, as an owner, he would look at it that that's his equity. But as a banker, we would look at it, we had required equity, so there's some of that that's extra.
Let me, so that's the total. And yesterday you said round numbers around 800,000. It's actually a little more than that. It's
What was it, 800,000?
the total equity he had in the project through December of 2005.
Right at about, just over 8, it appears. 668, 768, 850-ish,
850,
830.
830.
My math is correct.
And once that 210,000 is deducted from the draw, it would be improper for somebody from Fifth Third to expect City Center to go deposit it in an escrow account, wouldn't it? But let's look at page 35.
Well, for the first building, correct. For the second building, he would have to, they would be, once he started the second building, but at the time that I left, we weren't aware that the second building had started.
Once this 210,000 is done, no one from Fifth Third should ever be coming back saying you need to deposit $840,000 in equity for the first 4 buildings, should they?
I wouldn't think so. From my,
This is an accepted practice that you use. Mr. Plank agreed to let you do that with the understanding that he'd satisfied his equity.
correct.
And to your understanding then, he had satisfied his equity through the time that you were with the bank in April of 2006.
Correct.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Just so we're clear, what equity portion of the sources did he satisfy?
The initial first line of the 360, which was the cash equity, and 210,000, which would have been of the first building.
And these other numbers over here, that may be equity, but not equity the bank was requiring.
Yeah, again, it's difficult to tell without having the original contractor statement and seeing what all the detail of those costs were. But from my indication, I would say that those two things have been satisfied.
Who would prepare that initial contractor statement?
Mr. Plank.
Mr. Plank? City Center? So they would have a copy of it, right?
They should.
Okay, and if they had a copy of it, you could be able to look at that today and tell us exactly how those numbers go, correct?
It'd be a lot easier to break it down.
Right. Instead of having us guess and hypothecate as to what those numbers are.
Agreed.
But here's what we do know. Go to Joint Exhibit 10. Excuse me, not 10. '26. Here's what we know. The first draw was closed on October 24th, 2005. Right?
Correct.
And this was approved by who?
Would have been approved by me, Mr. Plank, the title company.
So Mr. Plank agreed to this.
Correct.
He agreed that there was a draw request from his company of $781,000. My eyes are bad. I think that's
$840.
Okay. And less they actually required $170.
Correct.
That was on that document when he signed it on October 24th, 2005.
Correct.
Nothing further.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, sir. Now the jury may have some questions for you. Ladies and gentlemen, follow the same procedure and answer your questions.